Well, I'm going to get started on the webinar today. And part of this is I want to make sure that we cover the content that we've got set out for you, because we've got a lot of content. And my goal, obviously, is to use your time wisely. So you see the title on the screen here, and it's Unlock Your Secret Superpower, Emotional Intelligence Skills. So Julie and I guess my clicker again, Julie's not working, so I'm going to go to the bottom here. And hello from Colorado here. So Julie Points is our business development manager, and she is what I call my wing woman. And what you're looking at here is Red Rocks in Colorado. So if you ever get a chance to visit our lovely state, please visit us in Golden, Colorado. So a lot of times before I start a webinar, I want to ask the question, who are you and what do you do? So I'm going to give you the cliff notes on it. We are a sales development firm. We specialize in teaching emotional intelligence to sales organizations, and we really work in 4 buckets. The first bucket, we will do standalone emotional intelligence workshops. Often people start with us with an emotional intelligence assessment. We bring that into the workshop. A lot of people hire us, obviously, for consultative sales training. That is also wrapped around EQ, and then sales management, sales leadership training, again, wrapped around EQ. And finally, we do a lot of sales kickoffs and conferences. So our goal today is really to help you joining us bridge something I like to call the knowing and doing gap, because I'm going to guess most of you joining us today are pretty darn good at sales. You've read the sales books. You're a lifelong learner. However, you might find yourself making some of the same selling mistakes that, frankly, we did 25 years ago. And I'll give you a quick example. You know, all of us have read the book, heard the cute phrase, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And if you've been like me on some sales conversations with prospects and clients, I have talked too much and listened too little. Now, that is not due to lack of knowledge. Often it's due to lack of impulse control, my desire to help, maybe lack of self-awareness, where I don't realize I'm presenting solutions too soon and too often. So our goal today is to really equip you with really 100% of the skills out there. You know, the hard selling skills, lots of great books out there. We teach a lot of hard skills. Today, we'll be talking about those soft skills that help you bridge the knowing and doing gap. Now, this is our other goal and mission. It's really to help you manage the emotional roller coaster of sales, business, and life, because there is a lot of conversation around mental health, stress, anxiety. We see professionals dropping out, burning out. And you know what? It doesn't have to be that way. So I am more, I guess, convicted today that as a society, as a sales professional, developing the soft skills will help you manage this emotional roller coaster. So the first EQ skill I'd like to talk about today is a skill called reality testing. And reality testing is the ability to see things as they are rather than what you'd like them to be. And here's the harsh reality, a little tough love coming your way. The reality is there has always been hard times in life, sales, and business. You know, if you take a look at this slide, back in the 1930s, in a 6-year period, there was the drought in what they called the Dust Bowl. And many of these people were farmers. They were making a nice living, and all of a sudden there's no rain. They have to migrate to California. There's no work there, or the work they were getting was not being paid well. Tough times. But then we go to the recession of 1980s. Unemployment was at 10.8. And of course, most of us lived through the 2008 financial debacle. So the reality is there's always been tough times there. And here's more news. Tough times or turbulent times are here to stay. Because if you take a look at this screen, Julie and I were very fortunate to attend a conference a couple months ago. Dr. Nadia, I will not attempt to say her last name again, but she is the president and founder of the Reinvention Academy. And she posed a very interesting question to the audience. She said, raise your hand. I'd like to see your best guess on the number of recessions we've had in the last 20 years. Okay, so there were a lot of guesses out there, 10, 20. I'm going to read the stats here. We have had 469 recessions since 1988. Why? We're a global economy. And as Dr. Nadia said, you know, if you've got a recession going on in the Congo, it sometimes affects other parts of the world. So her advice to us is get used to it. Turbulence is the new normal. And she also shared the fact that, you know what, today's times are 100 times more uncertain than they were back in the 70s. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, why did I join this webinar? I did not come to be depressed. I came to be inspired. I'm going to inspire you because this is the reality. Change, technology, global economy. We've got all sorts of change that's happening more often and rapidly. But with emotional intelligence, you have the ability to manage the change. However, be aware, because human beings, well, let's face it, we don't like change. You know, we get in those comfort zones, even though we subscribe to being that, you know, top producer, which I believe all of you are, or you wouldn't be taking the time to join today. But take a look at this picture of a sales professional on a horse. Sometimes we just long for the good old days. We just want to go back to the way things are. And here's my warning. What you resist persist, because here's what I've seen in my years of coaching and training. You know, we'll be looking at the good old days, wishing they'd come back. Gosh, I'd like to be able to do business the way I wanted to. But the fact is, if you continue to resist change, you will not move your energy, your mindset to creating a new future, a better future. And this really happened in the pandemic. I saw it in sales teams and in my profession. You know, I had some fellow colleagues that said, you know what, I'm not doing that virtual speaking. I'm not doing that virtual instructor-led training. This is going to pass. Well, 6 months in, it was not passing. And we were a company that did almost all in-person training. But you know what I quickly realized? The good old days are gone. The good new days are here, and we need to embrace the change. I'm going to quit resisting. And I made a decision that I was not only going to get as good teaching virtually as in person, I was going to get better. So this leads us into our another EQ skill, which is self-awareness. And this is the mega skill, because in the words of Socrates, know thyself. Because think about it, that what you're not aware of, you cannot change. And that what you're not aware of, you are bound to repeat. And one of the reasons I'm on such a mission to teach EQ to every sales organization in the world is because I see a lot of hardworking sales professionals. I see a lot of hardworking managers making the same mistakes. And this is called the blind spot. This is called lack of self-awareness. So it's not lack of hard work. It's not the desire to do better. It's simply because we're not building the self-awareness muscle. So the number one tool, the number one strategy for building your self-awareness, you've heard it before. This is not new news for you, but in order to build the self-awareness muscle, you've got to make a decision, have a belief to carve out quiet time each and every morning, because in the stillness, you can get clarity of thought. See, a chaotic mind is not a clear mind. A cluttered mind can't come up with creative solutions. And in today's business environment, and as I said, turbulent, well, not me, Dr. Nadia, it's the new normal. So if we're going to cope with the changes, be creative, make the changes in a timely manner, we've got to carve out the quiet time. Now, there's many, many contexts for why we carve out quiet time. For some people, it's absolutely being still. For others, they practice positive affirmations. Today, where I'd like to direct the conversation is carve out the quiet time to tune into your emotions. Because again, that which you're not aware of, you cannot change. And for many of us, if we're not tuned in to our emotions, we can become a salesperson, a sales manager that gets easily triggered. And when we become easily triggered, that is when we default into fight or flight responses. We don't control our emotions, and therefore we're not able to execute the right selling behaviors, communication behaviors. So in this context for today, what I'd encourage you to think about is in that quiet time, start with 5 minutes. You don't have to do 30 and 45 minutes like I do today. but you can ask the introspective questions. You know, what trigger showed up today that created this emotion? Because triggers are people, places, and situations. What emotion was it? Why was I feeling this emotion? But most importantly, how did it affect how I showed up? Because again, if we're not able to manage emotional triggers that are invariably going to come up every day, people, places, situations, I can tell you, I can go to the grocery store and invariably get emotionally triggered because the person in front of me is taking too much time. That sounds like a logical, rational human being, right? So today, what I'd suggest, as you're carving out that quiet time and you're trying to manage the emotions, because again, if you're not emotionally stable, you're not able to execute the right behaviors. And one of the things you can do in that quiet time is examine your stories. Now, I've authored 3 books, so people say, oh, you're a great writer. Well, I've become a pretty good writer. However, my response always is, you know what, you're probably a pretty good writer too, because many of us are writing big fiction novels about our abilities, about our company, about the environment that affect the actions we can take. So let's walk through this model. And it was developed back in the 1940s by Thomas Merton, and it's called the self-fulfilling prophecy model. And so it starts with being aware in that quiet time. What am I thinking? Because for many of us, if we're not intentional, we can actually be thinking negative self-limiting thoughts. Now, the research is clear. Whatever you think long enough becomes your truth, becomes your story. But here's what I want you also to observe. With those thoughts and those beliefs and stories, there's associated emotions. And there can be many emotions, but today I'm going to address the biggest one that I see out there: fear. And I'm not talking scaredy cat fear, or the fear that you'd get if you had to run into a burning building. I'm talking about the fear of not being enough, knowing enough, doing enough. Because here's what happens. Thoughts, beliefs, and those emotions drive the actions you take or don't take. And so if you start with a negative self-limiting belief, you probably take inappropriate actions or no actions. And guess what? It supports your original thought. So let's make this practical for you today. Let's run through a couple of hypotheticals using the self-fulfilling prophecy. A negative self-belief can be this: wow, you know, my prospects, yeah, they know more than me. Now, here's what can happen. In tough economic times, and I have been through 4 downturns, you know, the dot-com crash, the 9/11 tragedy, 2008, and COVID. So what I have observed in each one of those downturns is decision-making moves up the ladder, so to speak. And so you might have been very comfortable, had the relationship with a director, but now we got to call in the CFO, the CMO, want something in the C-suite. Here's what happens to our thoughts. Wow, big office, big titles, big questions. They're going to ask me questions I don't know. But the emotion associated with that is fear. And the fear is looking stupid or getting stumped. Now, how can that affect the actions we take? Because all the sales books tell you how to call on the C-suite, user buyer, technical buyer, right? Influencer buyer. The knowledge is there on the hard skills. But I can tell you through my years of coaching, if we don't manage these thoughts, these emotions, we don't execute the right hard skills. So I would suggest you examine that thought and think about, when am I not calling at the right level? And 2 things can happen. Sometimes you don't call on them at all. You make excuses for not running those type of meetings, or you do run the sales conversation. And if I can be blunt, you show up kind of pathetic, apologetic. And here's the irony. In tough economic times, I believe, that's my self-talk, people are still spending money. Somebody is spending money out there. However, because they're investing dollars, they might ask you tougher questions. And the reason is not to challenge you, but it's to make sure that if I partner with you, your company, it's the right decision. So when I get presented with challenging questions, my belief changes to, wow, this is a person that's serious. This is a person, big title, spends big money. But let's look at that second thought bubble. And this is a belief that can happen in tough economic times, or frankly, any economic times. Our thought process, and then we've got counterparts that'll support that belief system. And the conversation becomes this: you know, the only way you can sell business today is you've got to discount. Remember, whatever you say to yourself long enough becomes the truth. Now, here's the irony. The emotion associated with that is also fear. If I don't discount when I'm meeting with that good negotiator, and by the way, good negotiators negotiate. So if I don't, I'm going to lose the sale. Who says you're going to lose the sale? Good negotiators negotiate. At that point, you apply your negotiation tactic strategy. But because we're getting emotionally triggered, emotionally charged, all those good negotiation skills go right out the window, and sometimes we discount too soon and too often. We spend more time pre-call planning when we're going to discount rather than how we're going to sell value, how we're going to handle predictable negotiations that happen with good negotiators. Watch your thoughts, because your thoughts become your actions. Now, what I'm going to do here, it looks like we've got a few questions that came in. I want to make sure I am not leaving anyone hanging right now. And these might have been the folks that just checked in. Okay, we're good. And we will have a Q&A session, and I will stay on as long as you want after this. So again, my encouragement to you is that, and let me find that little clicker again to move this slide, is, whoops, what did I do there, Julie? You might have to come down here. I think I didn't have my glasses on. Hold on, people. This is actually a little test. It's a test. This is why I have my co-producer. And let's go to this slide here. We are back. All right, very good. I got a little emotionally triggered, but I'm back. Okay, so I will keep my glasses on here. So again, the purpose of carving out that quiet time is to tune in to when am I getting triggered? Why am I getting triggered? But don't live there. What you want to do is you want to ask yourself the question, what can I do to show up better? Because that's in your control. The thoughts are in your control. What can I read? Who can I hang with? But here's the other side benefit of carving out quiet time. In the stillness, as you're tuning into your own emotions, you will develop the powerful skill of empathy. And empathy, as we know, and it's almost becoming a cliche out there, is knowing and caring about what somebody else is thinking or feeling. However, we do have to ask ourselves the question, if we don't know or care about what another human being, prospect, customer, peer, colleague is thinking or feeling, how can we possibly influence that person? And here's the reality testing answer. You cannot. And I love the quote by Charles Einstein. And let's see here. I think I'm going to catch us up here. Catch us up, catch us up, catch us up. And this quote by Charles Einstein is, what's it like to be you? And I can't even tell you, but those words describe empathy. But here's a couple of points I want to make as you desire to build the empathy muscle. There's a few other skills that we must develop in order to be a more empathetic human being. And this one's going to be a little tough love. Everybody ready for it? We've got to quit being so self-absorbed. Yes. You know, I heard a great speaker, Dr. Tasha Eurich. She wrote a book, Insight, and she's an academic and does a lot of research in this area. And, you know, from the stage, she said something very powerful. She said, you know, we're starting to become a little bit of a narcissistic society. And this is where we have to be aware. None of us want to show up and be a narcissist, but think about it. 25 years ago, you didn't have social media where you're scrolling who likes me, who doesn't like me. And so without knowing it, and that's why self-awareness is so important, we can become self-absorbed. But when you study the EQ skill of empathy, it's about being other absorbed. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And as Daniel Goleman, who really is credited with bringing EQ out of the academic world, he says, you know, if you're tuned out of your own emotions, you'll be poor at reading them in other people. So this is why carving out quiet time is so important, because as you tune into your own emotions, and you can really stop generically labeling emotions. Oh, I'm angry. No, you're probably not angry. You're probably feeling unappreciated. You know what? You might be feeling overwhelmed, or you might be just flat out discouraged. So when you can tune into your emotions, you are better able to state what another human being is thinking or feeling. Now, here's another mistake that can happen when we are trying to demonstrate empathy. We often confuse empathy with active listening skills rather than empathetic listening skills. Let me share the difference. You're in a meeting. This prospect is very open, and they share with you their frustration with their existing vendor on customer service or quality. You, being the good salesperson, say, you know what? I can understand your frustration. And you check the empathy box. That is not empathy. You've simply validated what the person said. That's validation skills. That might be active listening skills. See, the empathetic listener can explain why the person is frustrated. They can tell, if you're frustrated, here's why you're feeling that emotion. And when you can describe that to another human being, your prospects and your customers, that's when you create an emotional connection. You elevate the conversation. And I'll guarantee you, the conversation changes. It moves from transactional to deep, meaningful work. So let me give you a couple of examples here. You know, this first one is one that we often teach in our sales training. It's dealing with the unspoken objection. Empathy is actually the skill that is used to talk about the unspoken objection, because here's another reality check. Often people don't say what they're thinking or feeling. And sometimes it's simply because they don't know what they're thinking or feeling. So if you read this, you know, Mr. Ms. Prospect, and they're looking to move their business to you, but you can tell there's a little unspoken objection about moving. If I were in your shoes, I'd be hesitant to change. That's what they're thinking, you know, and you might be thinking, gosh, is this going to be worth the hassle of change? Am I going to get the ROI? See, when you say what somebody's actually thinking or feeling, the conversation changes. Yeah, well, let's talk about that. You know, for sales leaders that are joining us today, you might be coaching a salesperson, and instead of going into advice right away, you say, you know what, I'm guessing you're wondering right now, what the heck do I do? A month ago, I had a full sales pipeline. See, the salesperson sitting there going, I thought I was going to hit next quarter's numbers easily. Say what they're thinking or feeling. And then finally, you know, you might be overwhelmed. You just mastered virtual selling, and now we got this AI thing coming. So here's my final tip on empathy. Empathy is a thinking skill before it's a verbal skill. And if you don't take the time to carve out time to tune into your own emotions, to know what you're thinking or feeling, pretty good chance you're going to fall into the active listening and validation bucket. Those are good conversations, but empathy creates great conversations. But now let's talk about our last topic today. You know, we've talked about emotional regulation, emotional self-awareness, and empathy. Let's talk about execution. And if you develop these skills, emotional intelligence skills, I promise you, and I don't say promise lightly, you will be able to execute selling behaviors in any type of selling environment. Now, there's lots of tools out there by which to manage stress, manage adversity. Here's the number one tool I'd like you to consider and take away today: perspective. Because remember, this thing called life, you're going to deal with adversity. All right. That's just the reality here. But what the research shows, it's not generally the adversity that you really brings people down. It's how you react to it. So let me roll you back over 20 years ago. I was vice president of sales, and we were taking this lovely incentive trip to Austria. And I got over there 2 days ahead of time to get things ready. However, as my entire sales group that had earned the incentive trip was getting ready to take off, storms hit the United States. We can all relate to that. So here's what happened. I'm greeting everybody in the lobby of this lovely Austrian hotel. And there were two types of reaction to this adversity. Now, predictably, I had some sales reps who are like, you know, my luggage is lost. I don't know, when's it going to get here? They're thinking I can find the luggage, and quite upset. And then there was another perspective. And I remember one salesperson coming up and she said, don't worry about that lost luggage. Gives me an opportunity to buy new clothes. And by the way, underwear is highly overrated. I'm going to have a great time. That's perspective. And every day you get to choose. Because if you look at some of the most resilient people in the world, it is not because they have not had adversity in their life. Their perspective is generally, what can I do? How can I react to it? What's the most appropriate response? And here's a great resource for you. I was introduced to Carol Lawson by Varsity, one of our clients and also my former company. And she has a great video on the internet. Please look it up. And so as you watch this 2-minute video, you will find her message is this. And she's quite funny. She'll say, you know, we're all waiting for life to get easier. We're all waiting for the easy bus. But let me tell you something. That's not going to happen. What successful people do is they learn to handle hard better. They learn to handle hard better. Now, let's take everything we've been learning this morning. That's called reality testing. Yep, sometimes life is hard, okay? And the reality is life isn't always easy. However, I'm going to give you some encouragement today because you do learn how to handle hard better. And here's one of many tools that we teach. The number one tool I teach for people to manage stress, to move through adversity, is a concept out of the psychology world called locus of control. And it was developed amazingly back in the 1950s by Julian Rotter. And in studying successful people, resilient people, what he uncovered is there was 2 types of locus of control. People, salespeople, sales professionals with a high internal locus of control, you know, they have this belief and mantra. If it is to be, it's up to me. And so they immediately take control. And this is not to sound like Pollyanna. And I'm going to put my glasses back on so I can read some of this. But you know what? I can control my activity. I can control asking for advice. I can call up a colleague. I can practice. I can sit down with clients. And even if they can't give me money right now, I can introduce them to other resources. I have the ability to learn. But as Julian Rotter discovered back in the 50s, there are also people that have what they call external locus of control. And the cheer is entirely different. If it is to be, it ain't up to me. And a little bit more tough love coming. These are generally your victims of the world. So they're waiting for the world to line up and be perfect. They get paralyzed by adversity. They don't take action. Nothing I can do about the economy. Well, if the company would have better prices, I don't get enough training. I don't get enough coaching. You know, marketing doesn't supply enough lead. My SDR doesn't qualify the leads. I'm here to tell you, if marketing doesn't provide enough leads, go out and make some. If your sales development rep isn't qualifying the leads, sit down with that person, have a conversation, spend more time. Because with resilient people, they have high internal locus of control and they take control. So where have we come? Emotional self-awareness, so you can manage those emotions. When you're stable, you're able. When you carve out the quiet time, you can get clarity of thought, but you also develop that powerful muscle of empathy. And then with all of those, we have the ability to execute even in turbulent times, because turbulence is the new normal. So we're here to help. One of the things I'd encourage you to do, take a picture. We'll also be sending out this recording. Today, what we're offering for the people that took the time to attend is our emotional intelligence assessment. It's quite a robust assessment. You can see the sample on our website. And what we do in that assessment, we measure you on 15 different emotional intelligence skills, from assertiveness to impulse control, optimism, self-actualization, emotional self-awareness. Then with that assessment, you will also have access to our video library. So it's a self-study library, but these are all the competencies that you'll get a report back. And what you're going to find is many of you are doing well. Maybe you could improve. In some cases, you might have areas that you could improve, but we're going to give you the tools and strategies to do that. So I encourage you to take advantage of that offer. You'll see on the website, it's usually $497, but for you today, we'd like to offer that at $247. So please stay connected with us. We do a lot of posting on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you because our goal today in running these webinars, we'll have another one June 16th, I think, Julie, is we're going to help you not only manage the emotional roller coaster, but enjoy the ride. What we will be doing, we'll be editing the video, and then we will send out this video link. So it's like anything in adult learning. I would encourage you to review it. Start studying emotional intelligence. If this is your first exposure to it, it's a big body of work. What we'll be covering in the June workshop is specifically the EQ skill of assertiveness. And to encourage all of you to show up to that, there was a study done many, many years ago by the Corporate Executive Board. I believe they're owned by Gartner now. And when they were studying the top attributes of salespeople, there were many things that came up. But what they found is the number one competency was assertiveness. Now, here's what's interesting. Assertiveness is not a hard skill. It's a soft skill. So we'll be taking a deep dive into that particular EQ skill so that you can know when and how assertiveness can help you throughout the sales process. So thank you for joining us this morning. We've enjoyed being your host and hostess.